now we are situated in the transitory phase that was the Renaissance that led us to the modern world. But how did this phase come into existence will be discussed only when we get to know the causes that went behind the advent of the new ideas of Renaissance. In order for us to understand the age of Renaissance, it is very important to look at the causes that gave rise to it, right? So do you remember that the Muslims and the Christians came face to face in a particular religious war? Now this religious war was known as the Crusades. Now this war was the holy war that was fought between the Muslim Turks and the Christians to gain the holy land, Jerusalem. Now it was not only Jerusalem that was, being fought, they were fighting for. They were also fighting for places like Antioch and Anatolia, right? That was very important for the Christians. Now if you take a look at this particular picture, you see that here Muslim camps are located outside the Roman city. And here you can see that the Christian and the Islamic forces are fighting outside the city of Italy. So whenever we talk about the Crusades in history, it is often seen through a very negative light, right? But Crusades also has a very important role to play when it comes to the advent of Renaissance. Why so? The major reason being that it established, or rather re-established, the contacts between the Islamic and the Christian worlds, primarily, through the revival of trade. Now, how trade? Because when the Roman Empire was split into Western and Eastern, the trade routes were cut for the western side of the empire after the 4th century AD. Now, when Crusades happened, these routes opened up and the forces were coming in, and there was a sort of intermixture that happened, and that opened up the trade for them. Now, along with the trade, there were also, the flow of goods, ideologies, and various ideas that came from the east to the west. Now, who were bringing these ideas or ideologies to the West? It was the artists and the scholars who were being patronized in the Western Europe. Scholars like Aristotle and Plato were being, they were migrating to the Western Roman Empire, and they were establishing their various ideals, right? Various ideas, and they were being accepted in the West. So now this migration not only, caused the people to come and settle down in various places, but they were also bringing their culture, their ideas, and they were settling down in new places, right? Now this entirely happened because there was a growth in economic relations, which was due to the trade, as we saw, and this culture, this renewed idea of culture was reflected in the age of Renaissance. After the Crusades, what happened was the Ottoman Turks who came face to face with the Byzantine Empire, they were trying to encroach upon that area. So they were moving in, and after a point of time, the main city, that was the capital city called Constantinople, fell around 1453 AD, right? So the fall of Constantinople therefore becomes another major factor or another major cause for the rise of Renaissance. And why so? Because these, migrations that were happening were essentially because of the factors like the Crusades, like the wars, like the fall of a major capital. So what happened was these scholars, these Greek, Arab, Roman scholars were coming from the Eastern Roman Empire to the Western Roman Empire. Now, the interesting fact here is that they essentially were located in Italy. So they were particularly settling down in Italy. Now, when these people are of course coming in and settling in new places, they were bringing with them their knowledge as well as their manuscripts, their ideas. Now this gave rise to an intellectual flow, to an environment of knowledge that ultimately was showcased in the age of Renaissance as well. But why were these, scholars essentially coming in from the Eastern and Western Roman Empire? And why essentially, was this the point of time when their ideas were being accepted or were being propagated in the Renaissance? That was because, at this point of time when they were situated in Eastern Roman Empire, the Orthodox Church had an immense amount of dominance, right? And they weren't being able to speak their mind. Once they moved to the Western Roman Empire and they started realizing, they started sort of garnering the individualistic sense, that is when the intellectual environment therefore developed. And the important point to note here is that all this was happening in the city of Italy, right? If you remember that we have already studied about the rise of feudalism and the feudal structure, where the kings were placed in the highest order of the hierarchy and the peasants were in the lowest, right? Now, this entire hierarchy or this entire structure was essentially linked to the land, right? Where there was a lord-vassal relationship that was developed. Okay, so this entire factor of exploiting the peasants created a very divided society. This enslavement in the feudal system was what created this particular divided society. After a point of time then, due to this trade that we discussed, there were various new towns that were developing, right? And these new towns saw, the rise of few new sort of occupations and people in occupation like that of the merchants and the bankers. So these peasants, serfs, who were essentially being exploited in a feudal system, who were being enslaved in a feudal system, they found these new towns, very lucrative. So in order to find new opportunities, they were migrating to the new cities. So what essentially happened here was that from an agriculture-based society, the entire focus was shifting to trade, because they were looking for a second sort of opportunity in the cities. So we see that the feudal system was highly exploitative and it treated the peasants and serfs very harshly. Now, due to this very reason, the peasants and the serfs were moving to the cities to search for work. Now, we can therefore understand this lack of labor in the rural areas led to the decline of feudalism. So there was nobody left to work on the agricultural fields. Now, slowly and steadily, we see that the society is moving towards, modernization, and these people, these peasants and serfs, they are trying to look for a secondary occupation, an alternative mode of earning. Therefore, the society is turning to trade. Thus, we see that the abundance of labor in the cities shifted the focus to secondary occupations and better ways of living. So now, all these factors that we have discussed about, for example, the crusades, the scholars migrating, the thriving trade, all of this fueled the economic prosperity in these areas. Now, not only did it fuel the economic prosperity, but there was a spirit that developed within the people, right? Now, this spirit was the spirit of inquiry. Now, how would people then, start to question or start to understand which idea to accept and which idea, was wrong for them, right? So the people started to read and ask questions to each other and also to dominant institutions like the church, right? And they were now conscious and they were focused on the well-being and interest of themselves, right? We have already studied about individualism. So this sort of, factors was the reason why the focus shifted from God to the individual self. Now, this spirit of inquiry that we are talking about essentially, looked at the factor that happiness could also be received without, God advocating it, or God being the middleman, or church, in fact, being the advocate of this happiness, right? There were, people who were questioning this institution of church. People like Roger Bacon, like Thomas Aquinas, like Peter Abelard were the ones who questioned the church, the institution that was at the highest level of hierarchy. So now, how would these people therefore come to know about what is right and what is wrong if they do not know about what the institution of church deals with, right? So that factor developed from reading, right? But how would they read in that age? So if your answer is the invention of printing press, then you're absolutely right. The invention of printing press gave the people the accessibility to read. Now, reading became accessible to masses, and this habit of reading, or this idea of reading, developed the sense of individuality in them and also developed self-consciousness. How so? Because when they were reading about the church, reading the Bible, they were being able to understand what the Bible actually states, right? But do you know who exactly invented this printing press? So Johannes Gutenberg, a man who was born in Germany in the city of Mainz, came up with this idea of a mechanical, movable type of printing press. So essentially his methods used a movable type, right, with certain blocks made of iron that used oil ink, and that was used to mechanically print on papers, right? So the invention happened in 1439, right? And Johannes Gutenberg revolutionized this entire, idea of publishing. So there was a spark, it was a revolution that something like a printing press could be created, right? So essentially one of the, hits that Johannes Gutenberg created was his 42-line Bible. Now, what is a 42-line Bible? A 42-line Bible is basically a Bible in which each page would have 42 lines written in it. Now, this 42-line Bible was much cheaper than the handwritten Bible, and thus it was easily available to people. This 42-line Bible was printed in 1455, after which the entire industry of publishing was created in Europe. So as you saw that this, easy access to knowledge, to intellect, was what created this surge, this idea that, people could understand and consciously decide of what was right and what was wrong. So the printing press essentially revolutionized the factor of knowledge. So as we saw, the factors, for example, the crusades, the fall of Constantinople, the decline of feudalism, and the invention of printing press essentially paved the path for the age of Renaissance. Now we saw that during all of these, causes like the crusades, the fall of Constantinople, a lot of people were shifting and they were migrating with their ideas. But where were they going? So we see that Italy in 15th century is the place where all of these people are migrating and settling in. So Italy was the first place that was hit by the Renaissance ideas. So thus we see that the Renaissance ideas are being established in Italy by various families, and they are promoting it, patronizing it. We can view that by the story of Italy in 1469, when a nobleman called Lorenzo de' Medici, who belonged from the wealthy family of Medicis, took over his family business of trading and banking. So essentially they were traders and they were merchants. Now, because of the growth of economy due to the open trade routes, their wealth also kept increasing at this point of time. And Italy at this point of time also saw the influx of various people, right? Because of various factors, people were migrating to Italy. Now the primary factor was of course the crusades, which opened up various routes, but also the reason that Italy was situated, it was a coastal area, right? And also the factor that it was a major Christian center, which was important to the Christian people. Thus the Medici family, who were wealthy, they thought that money should be used in promoting beauty, truth and wisdom, right? Because these were the people who were ideally patronizing the artists. These were the people who were housing the artists so that the Renaissance ideas could be promoted, could be supported by economy. For example, we see the picture of Michelangelo here. Do you know that Michelangelo and Lorenzo de' Medici, they were very close friends, and even Michelangelo stayed there for 5 years and they dined at the same table, right? So Italy therefore became the place where all these new ideas were growing, and it was because of the growing prosperity trade, because of families like the Medicis who were patronizing the artists with the wealth that they had. Now, where specifically in Italy? It was Florence which saw the banking and financial institutions grow. We have already discussed that new guilds were coming up in the cities. So thus we see, because of these financial and banking institutions, Florence saw the first ideas of Renaissance flourish there. Now, prosperity in trade also therefore fueled these ideas in Florence. Now, can you tell me in which city did Renaissance first take place? Was it Venice, Rome, Florence or Naples? That's right, it was Florence. So we see that Italy was utilizing all of its resources, which made its environment economically and culturally conducive to progressive ideas of the Renaissance. Now, not only was Florence flourishing, we see places like Venice and Genoa becoming very vibrant centers during the time of Renaissance as well. Thus, we saw how exactly the advent of Renaissance happened, from where the causes gave rise to the new idea as well as the rebirth of older times. Thus we see how the Renaissance ideas were growing in Italy, which ultimately affected the ideas of modern world. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at deltastep.com or download the DeltaStep app to get access to all our 5000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly, learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it is rewarding too. So register for free now.